Welcome to the Explainer. We're totally bypassing the usual pleasantries today because we need to dive straight into a genuinely intense, emotional core that's documented in our source material. We're looking at a deeply personal, highly documented account of a legal system encounter that literally challenges our fundamental assumptions about justice, humanity, and bureaucracy. So, buckle up because the subject matter today is raw and the systemic implications are just massive.
I want you to really think about this provocative question. What happens when the legal system outright refuses to confirm if someone is alive? It's a pretty chilling premise, right? We typically view our courts as arbiters of truth, the ultimate protectors of citizens. But what if that very machinery becomes this impenetrable wall? The sources we're unpacking today present a scenario where a desperate search for basic human safety is met with cold, unyielding procedural silence.
To truly grasp this, we have to start with this incredibly raw, unfiltered quote from Kyle McAleen Smith, the individual at the center of today's source material. He stated, "I don't know if Emily is still alive." Just sit with that for a second. This completely grounds our entire explainer in his immense personal sacrifice in what can only be described as a state of perpetual existential fear. It's a level of deeply bonded, hyper-specific trauma that most of us can honestly barely even imagine.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the April court proceeding, a system unmoved. The sources describe this cold, almost cinematic reality during an April court proceeding. Kyle entered the space voluntarily, right? He's seeking clarity and basic rights. But instead of finding any sort of compassion or answers regarding his ex-partner Emily, he was met with a judge who actually threatened him with jail time. And crucially, despite the absolute gravity of the proceedings, Emily was not physically present in the courtroom.
And this really highlights the bizarre, almost dystopian procedural maneuvering at play here. Emily existed in that room only as a disembodied audio recording. Really think about the psychological impact of that. The person you were bonded to, the person whose safety you are terrified for, is reduced to a mere audio track by the state, all while you're standing there being threatened with incarceration. It's wild.
Now, amidst this massive, intimidating legal machinery, Kyle's only plea was deeply human and remarkably simple. He wasn't asking for complex financial settlements or vindictive rulings at this moment. He was just asking for what he calls a basic accommodation. Basically, a simple, verifiable confirmation of life and safety.
Section 2. A simple plea denied. Proof of life.
So the system completely overrode the human element. The court, point-blank, refused to grant him the basic dignity of knowing his partner had survived and was safe. The sources outline how the legal apparatus prioritized its own procedural momentum over a fundamental human plea. It left Kyle entirely in the dark about the one thing that actually mattered most to him.
The really crucial point here is how this rejection wasn't just a one-off event. It was part of a cascading failure. Let's walk through this timeline to see Kyle's rapid descent into becoming what the sources term a modern outlaw. In month 1, he does what anyone would do, right? He hires a lawyer. But by month 2, he's inexplicably dropped. From month 3 through 6, he desperately searches for new representation. And by month 7, he's totally locked out of professional legal help and forced to represent himself against this highly sophisticated legal machine.
Take a look at this staggering metric, 200. That is the exact number of lawyers Kyle claims to have contacted. He was willing to pay them via credit card, 200 professionals in the legal community, and he had absolutely zero success finding representation. No way, right? This number really punches up the sheer scale of the systemic alienation he experienced. It's not just bad luck, it's a systemic exclusion. To truly grasp the devastating real-world impact of being locked out like this, you have to look at his own records. He stated, "I sold my condo for $10,000 so that I could speak to Emily's mother." Just think about that. Without a lawyer to handle the communication or the separation of assets, he endured extreme financial losses. He literally sold real estate for a fraction of its value just to try and navigate the bureaucracy and establish contact with her family.
Section 3. The immense psychological toll. Navigating the machine.
Based on these forced interactions, Kyle coined a really crucial term: the divorce industrial complex. He defines this as a systemic, profit-driven structure existing within family law. So instead of acting as a conflict resolution center to help families transition, he argues the legal ecosystem actually operates fundamentally as an industry specifically designed to extract capital and resources from people when they are at their absolute most fragile.
Let's break down the mechanics of this complex. How does it actually work? Well, according to the text, first, it actively weaponizes a lack of family support. Basically, if you don't have a safety net, you're an easy target. Second, it completely disregards the severe psychological toll, or what the sources refer to as the thin skull principle in mental health, just totally ignoring the profound emotional damage being inflicted. And finally, it heavily penalizes individuals who fall outside standard socioeconomic norms or conventional behavior.
Which leads us to this incredibly heavy accusation. The sources allege that this system ultimately operates as domestic abuse scaled by the state itself. Now, we are reporting this neutrally as it's documented in the text, but it's absolutely vital to present this phrase because it serves as the ultimate summary of the psychological devastation described by those caught in the machinery of this complex.
Section 4. Weaponizing legal formalism. Procedure over humanity.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the massive gap between what we expect the system to do and the reality. On one side, we have ideal due process. That's the social contract we all believe in, right? A system focused on finding the truth and ensuring fairness. But on the other side, we have legal formalism. This is a strict, rigid adherence to procedural rules. Kyle's framework argues that this formalism is actively weaponized to obscure the truth, drain resources, and coerce outcomes, rather than actually achieve justice.
Let's connect this concept of legal formalism right back to Kyle's physical reality. The sources document that he was forced to perform complex, highly demanding legal duties remotely, like navigating PDFs and legal filings, while he was literally physically locked out of his own condo. The rules of the court were weaponized against him, draining his energy and resources while completely ignoring the bizarre and cruel context of his living situation.
Section 5. The ecosystem of avoidance. Society's reflex. The sources provide a critical insight from Kyle's colleague that explains this. She states, "It's very hard for people to stay with someone else's pain. The mind tries to protect itself." Think about that for a second. When we are confronted with the raw, intense delivery of someone else's trauma, it hurts. So we have this involuntary psychological reflex to just disengage, to look away to protect our own mental state.
And this shows exactly how that natural human reflex scales up into something incredibly dangerous. It creates what's called an ecosystem of avoidance. Because individuals constantly look away to protect themselves, it builds this macro-level societal setup where deep, systemic pain is constantly ignored. This toxic environment is exactly what permits underlying injustices, like that April court proceeding where a man couldn't even get proof of life for his partner, to thrive completely unchecked in plain sight.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought regarding how we handle systemic injustice going forward. Based on the sources we've explored today, ask yourself, must society actually learn to witness pain before it can ever truly uncover the truth? It's a huge question, and one that absolutely challenges our own daily reflexes. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning the structures around you.